Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if that chatbot you are talking to is actually coordinating with you like a person would, or is it just a fancy program? Well, this new study dives deep into that exact question. Imagine you are trying to work with someone, like tapping a beat together or having a conversation. Now, what if one of those someones was a computer? Researchers are building more and more AI partners for us to interact with. But here's the tricky part they wanted to figure out. When we interact with AI, are we seeing something new happening because AI is different, or are we just changing how we act because we know it is AI? This study introduces a clever way called SCEIMA, which stands for Social Coordination Evaluation through Integrated Model Analysis, to help us separate these possibilities. It is like a detective tool for understanding how humans and machines coordinate. Think about it. We used to just watch people or give them simple tasks, but now computers can actually be part of the action, playing games with us, talking with us, or even trying to mirror our movements. This is super exciting because it gives researchers a lot more control than studies with just humans. They can tweak the computer's brain to see how it affects our behavior. But this also makes things confusing. If a human and a computer don't coordinate perfectly, is it the human's fault for not adapting, the computer's fault for being weird, or a mix of both? This is the juicy problem the researchers tackled. They explained that when humans work with other humans, lots of things are at play. We have our own quirks, our mood, how well we know the other person, and all sorts of social stuff. When we work with a computer, it is different. The computer has its own programmed rules, its speed, its delays, and when humans and computers get together, all these factors can mix and match in really complex ways. So, if the coordination goes wonky, it is hard to point a finger and say exactly why. The researchers decided to break down the problem into 3 different parts. First, are there human-specific effects? This means, do humans actually change how they behave, just because their partner is a machine, not a person? Second, are there model-specific effects? This asks if the computer's own programming and rules are the main reason for any differences in coordination. And third, are there interaction effects? This is when it is not just one or the other, but the combination of how the human adapts and how the model behaves creates a unique outcome. So, how did they build their detective tool, South Carolina, SCEIMA? It has 2 main stages. The first stage is the empirical stage. Here, they have actual humans do a coordination task. They have them do it with another human to get a baseline of how people normally coordinate. Then, they have the same humans do the same task with different computer models. This helps them see how human behavior changes or stays the same when the partner is artificial. Now, the real magic happens in the second stage, the analytical stage. This is where they stop involving humans and just use computer models. They take the same computer models that humans interacted with and set them up to interact with each other. They tweak the model settings so they try to behave like the humans did in the first stage. By comparing how these computer-to-computer interactions stack up against the human-human and human computer interactions, they can start to pinpoint the source of any differences. Let's look at their first case study, a music task. Imagine people tapping along to a beat. They measured how well people stayed in sync, looking at the little timing differences between their taps. This is called signed asynchrony. When 2 people tap together, that was their human-human baseline. Then they had people tap with a linear adaptive model, which is like a computer that makes small corrections based on the last little timing mistake. They also had people tap with a delay-coupled model, which is like a computer that tries to smoothly match what it thinks the other person is doing, but with a slight delay. After running their SCEIMA process, they found something interesting here. When they simulated 2 computer models interacting, one model, the linear adaptive one, was best at matching what 2 humans did together. That is the human-human baseline. But when it came to humans interacting with computers, the delay-coupled model seemed to produce coordination that was more like what humans actually did with computers. This suggests that humans changed their behavior. They adapted to the computer partner in a way that was different from how they would coordinate with another human. This points to an effect of human-specific features, meaning the human changed because they were interacting with a machine. For their second case study, they looked at something we all do: conversation. They focused on turn-taking, the dance of one person speaking, and then the other. They measured how much the length of people's conversational turns varied. When humans talk to each other, that variation has a certain pattern, a rhythm. They then had people chat with 2 different AI language models. One was a non-reasoning model, which just tried to predict the next word directly. The other was a reasoning model, which had an extra step where it thought a bit before responding. In this conversation study, the results were different. Even though one AI model seemed a bit closer to human conversations in terms of turn length variation, when they ran the computer-to-computer simulations, they found that the simpler, non-reasoning model was the best at mimicking the human-human conversation patterns. This led them to conclude that for conversational turn-taking, there wasn't a big difference in how humans behaved whether they were talking to another human or to these AI partners. It was more about the underlying dynamics of how the conversation was being generated. And in this case, the simpler AI model captured it well, suggesting no strong human-specific adaptation. So, what is the big takeaway here? SCEIMA is a really smart way to unpack these complex human-AI interactions. It moves beyond just asking, does the AI act like a human? And instead asks, what are the reasons for the differences we see? By comparing human-eye, and AI interactions, they can tell if the human is adapting. If the AI's design is the key factor or if it is a mix of both. This is super important because as AI gets more advanced, we're going to interact with it more and more. Understanding precisely how these interactions work and why they differ from human-human interactions will help us design AI that is not just functional, but also feels natural and works well with us. It means we can stop just trying to make AI imitate humans and start thinking about how to make them genuinely good partners. One thing to note is that this study really focuses on what we do, the observable actions and timing, not so much on what people think or feel about the AI. They controlled for whether people knew they were talking to an AI, so they could focus purely on the measurable behaviors. This is a strength because it is objective, but it also means they aren't directly tapping into the psychological experience of interacting with AI. Of course, like any research, this study has its limits. They often compare just 2 AI models at a time. As we get more and more complex AI, the number of models to compare could get huge. Also, sometimes the models they used were too similar to tell apart easily, or the way they set up the AI might not have been perfect. These could lead to ambiguous results or what they call undetermined outcomes. They suggest future research could explore these ambiguous cases more deeply, perhaps by testing more distinct models or using tasks that really highlight the differences between them. In conclusion, this research gives us a powerful new lens, South Carolina SCEIMA, to understand human-eye coordination. It's like a clear set of rules for figuring out whether differences in how we interact with AI are because of us, because of the AI, or because of the unique blend when we get together. This is a huge step forward in building AI that doesn't just work, but works with us in a way that makes sense. Now, my take on this is that it is a fantastic methodological contribution. The way they break down the problem into human-specific, model-specific, and interaction effects is really insightful. It moves beyond simplistic comparisons and forces researchers to be more rigorous in explaining why coordination outcomes differ. The case studies, while small, do a good job of illustrating how the framework can be applied. The musical synchronization study clearly shows an effect of human adaptation, which is a really interesting finding. Humans seem to change their tuning to fit the computer. The conversation study, however, suggests a more stable fundamental process, which is also valuable to know. One potential weakness is that the complexity of the framework could be a barrier for some researchers. Running both empirical studies and then multiple model simulations plus optimizing parameters sounds like a lot of work, especially for smaller labs. Also, as they mentioned, choosing the right coordination metric and distance function is crucial and can really influence the results. Different metrics might highlight different aspects of coordination, potentially leading to different outcomes. But the real-world implications are huge. Imagine designing social robots, virtual tutors, or even just better chatbots. By understanding these core principles of coordination, we can create AI that is more intuitive, more responsive, and ultimately more helpful and enjoyable to interact with. For future research, I'd love to see this framework applied to more diverse tasks and with larger groups of participants to see if these findings hold up. Investigating those undetermined outcomes they mentioned and figuring out what causes them also seems like a rich area for further exploration. What do you all think? Have you had a surprisingly natural or a really awkward interaction with an AI? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science deep dives and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.